Higher education receives hundreds of billions of dollars a year of taxpayer support. This is a classic sign that an industry fails the market test.
The nations of East Asia, Taiwan, China, Japan, right, Singapore, all began educating like crazy, investing like crazy in education when they were poor. They are not poor any longer.
You need college to convince today's employers to give you the same jobs that your parents or grandparents got right out of high school.
There are very few social science facts as well established as the fact that well-educated countries have vastly higher productivity than poorly educated countries.
Only a minuscule fraction of college grads take a meaningful interest in ideas or culture after graduation. People who attend events like the Soho Forum for fun are really weird.
Welcome to this 9th debate of the 2nd season of the Soho Forum, both to those in our physical audience at the Subculture Theater in downtown Manhattan and to the thousands around the globe who are watching us on live streaming. I'm Gene Epstein, director of the Soho Forum. We're a monthly debate series that features topics of special interest to libertarians and aims to enhance social and professional ties within New York City's libertarian community. We're partnered with Reason magazine in presenting these debates, and you can catch audio of all our events on the Reason podcast, which you'll find in the iTunes store. This is an Oxford-style debate in which the audience initially votes for, against, or undecided on the resolution, and then again after the debate is over. Whoever moves the vote in his or her favor is declared the winner. Go into sohovote.com to cast your initial vote. You'll find that tonight's resolution reads, all government support of higher education should be abolished. Now, with every Soho Forum, we have a warm-up act, and this evening we are pleased to bring back Dave Smith, who runs the great podcast, Part of the Problem. Dave, please come to the stage and warm us up.
Oh, hello. Why, thank you. Okay. How are we? Guys, how about a big round of applause for Gene Epstein, who's the reason we're all here at this wonderful debate series. As the world falls apart, we debate the issues only we care about. And it's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful time. What's the resolution? Should government funding of higher education be abolished? You had me at government and abolished. I am way on board. Why would I not want to be robbed to train the next generations of commies? I don't know. It's just, aren't college kids just the worst? Maybe I'm just getting old. But they hate everything that's good in the world, like capitalism and white people. Like, why can't you just appreciate a good thing when it's right in front of you? I don't know. Maybe that's a microaggression. I'm not sure. I don't know. I mean, we have been subsidizing college for a long time, and it's worked out pretty well. We elected the brilliant Donald Trump, so clearly this nation knows a thing or two. All right, one Trump supporter out there. College is such a ripoff that Donald Trump was like, I have to get in on that, and he started his own university, where you will probably learn more than you will at the average college. At least you know to put your name on the side of a building or something. I don't know. Donald Trump is president. I'm still blown away by it. It doesn't matter how long. I turn on the news every day just to make sure Trump is still president. I just need 5 minutes, and I'm like, okay, we're still doing it. And then I go back. Do you guys, I'm a kid. I grew up in like the 80s and 90s. And Bill Cosby was the epitome of success. He was the biggest comedian in the country. His nickname was America's Father. And now Bill Cosby is like an old blind rapist. And Donald Trump is president. Could you imagine if you were in a coma for 20 years? And then you came out of it, and they're like, so catch me up. Like, what's been going on since I've been gone? And they're like, all right, sit down. I mean, you're probably already laying down, but stay laying down. And you're like, so Cosby's a rapist and Trump is president. And you'd be like, clearly I'm still in this coma. So, like, I'm just going to chill out here. I don't know. Is college a good thing? I don't know. I mean, my family is, they're academics. Like, my mother is a PhD. and my sister has a PhD. I dropped out. And I'm more successful than all those losers. So I don't really know. I don't know what to say. They've never been on TV, either of them. Like, they haven't done anything. My little brother is, he's from, like, my mother's second marriage. He's much younger than me. He's graduating college next month. Or actually, I think, this month, 3 weeks. Yeah, I guess I'm going to stop by. But I don't... I hate college graduations. Have you been? Why are they so religious? You guys are both professors. Why do you dress up in the goofy robes and stuff? Like, why does Muammar Gaddafi have to give the diploma to the students? He's always got to sing a song and then participate in this whole dance. And I don't know. Thank you. It is, exactly. Kind of like Halloween, except for $60,000 a year. It's a very, very expensive Halloween. Also, by the way, college, for like 90% of it, is just a place to get drunk after high school. I don't know if you guys have been to college campuses lately, but that's all it is. When I went to college, the first, they have like the, it's like when you get there, there's like a week before class starts. And that's just, it's like orientation week, and everyone just gets hammered. I went out the first night I was at college. I was like, oh, the intellectual adventure begins. And I came back, and there were 3 stretchers outside my dorm room because kids had just drank themselves to half near death. Because they were the losers who weren't getting drunk in high school like me. Like, I'd already developed a tolerance by that point. And, there was this one kid, I remember, here's a taste of college for you, okay? Just the average college experience. So there was this kid, this was day 3. So still no classes, but day 3 of orientation week. And I became friendly with this one kid, Greg, and then there was this one weird kid, John, who just kind of kept following us around. And he was like a rich kid, like a party animal. We nicknamed him Cokehead John. We weren't that creative, but you can see why he got the nickname. And he was just a maniac, and he wouldn't leave us. Like, he was always by our side, and we were like, Cokehead John. And so this like 3 cars pulled up in front of our dorm of like town kids. I don't even think they went to the college, but they were just like these kind of tough kids. And they pulled up, and then they went into the dorm, and then Cokehead John looked at me and Greg, and he goes, watch this. This is going to be hilarious. And he goes over and started peeing on one of the cars. And I was like, this shouldn't be college right now. Like, none of this should be happening. And then the kids came back out, like, way quickly. I don't know if they were just dropping off drugs at the dorm, but they came out very quickly. Like, they didn't hang out with anyone. And they came out, and they go, hey, who peed on my car? As a reasonable reaction. And Cokehead John looked at me, and he goes, you got my back, right? And I was like, no, not at all. I absolutely don't have. I've known you for 3 days, and I don't even like you that much. And then I was just like, no. And then these kids just beat up Cokehead John. And, I didn't catch his back at all, but I gave a few, like, he's had enough, like from the distance, or just like, he's had a, like, and then they look at me, and I'm like, no, keep kicking him. I don't know, whatever, whatever you got to do, you got to do. Like, I kicked him once, yeah, screw him. And then they got in their car, and they drove off. Like, I guess they were like, we just beat someone up, we should leave. They had good sense. And then he got up, and he started screaming at us. And he was like, why didn't you have my back there? And I was like, why did you piss on their car? Like, what a ridiculous thing to do. And then he went in. This is all true, okay? I haven't taken one class yet. This is my college experience. And he went in inside the dorm, and he got a knife. And he came back out with his knife. And I was like, are you just determined to make this worse for yourself? Like, what? And he got a knife, and he was like, where are those kids? And I was like, they drove away. They're gone. Take the loss. You know what I mean? And then someone else came up to him, some other guy who I didn't know, and he didn't know. And he goes, hey, dude, what are you doing with the knife? And he goes, back off or I'll stab you. And to which the gentleman replied to him, he said, I'm your RA. I'll never forget that line as long as I live. He said, I'm your RA. And John just went, oh, sorry. And just a life lesson for you kids out there. Sorry doesn't cover I'm gonna stab you. Like it doesn't make that have not happened in the past. It's not like you could be like, back off or I'll stab you, and then go sorry, and you go, we're good, no problem. Like we're totally square. So yeah, Cokehead John got kicked out of school the next day. He got kicked out before one class. He hadn't even heard like welcome to, whatever 101. Didn't even get that far. He just got kicked out. And that was the last I ever saw Cokehead John. But my other friend, Greg, who I'm still friends with to this day, he did break into Cokehead John's dorm and steal his guitar. I guess the kid had a sweet electric guitar, and then he pawned it, and he bought me weed for like a week with the money from that guitar. So like it has a happy ending, is my point. All right, enjoy the debate, everybody. Thank you very much, Gene Epstein.
Dave Smith, listen to his podcast, Part of the Problem. I'm a devotee. Well, now for the main event. Arguing for the affirmative on the resolution, we have economist Brian Kaplan. Brian, please come to the stage. After the debate, let me take the far chair, Brian. And after the debate, Brian will be doing book signing and sales for his book, The Case Against Education, Why the Education System is a Waste of Time and Money. Opposing the resolution, we have economist Ed Glazer. Ed, please come to the stage. With regrets, Ed Glazer has promised us to keep back home early tomorrow morning, so he'll have to leave us immediately after the debate ends to take a car to the airport. So that's unfortunate, but Brian's going to be sticking around to sign books and to answer your questions. We now close the voting. Please take the podium and defend the resolution. All government support of higher education should be abolished. Take it away, Brian.
Thank you. So why should higher education receive government support? There are two main arguments. The first is the economic argument. Government support is allegedly economically beneficial, not merely for individual students, but for society as a whole. The second is the humanistic argument. Economic effects aside, government support is vital for the promotion of intrinsically valuable ideas, culture, and values. If I merely supported spending cuts, I'd only need to argue that the economic and humanistic arguments are overstated, since I'm advocating full separation of college and state. However, I've got to go further, and I do. My book, The Case Against Education, maintains that both the economic and humanistic arguments are deeply wrong. Economically speaking, subsidizing higher education is like subsidizing polluting industries. It's probably good that these industries exist, but the market tends to provide too much of them, not too little. The humanistic argument is similarly flimsy. While I do share the humanist ideals, higher education simply isn't very persuasive or transformative. The vast majority of college students arrive as Philistines, as our stand-up comedian did, and leave as Philistines. I'll leave that up to you. Now, since Ed and I are both economists, I'm going to focus on the economic argument. The Standard Story says that college is a great place to build human capital. Professors supposedly spend 4 years pouring useful job skills into their students. Why should we believe this? Well, because college graduates out-earn high school graduates by over 70%. Employers aren't stupid. If college didn't build tons of human capital, why on earth would the labor market shower these rewards on college grads? This is a very convincing story until you remember what college professors actually teach. Sure, there are a few majors that regularly prepare their students for the world of work, like engineering and computer science, but most of what college students study is simply irrelevant in the labor market. In real life, how often do you use history, government, literature, foreign languages, psychology, philosophy, or higher mathematics? By and large, students can safely forget such materials after the final exam because it never comes up again as long as they live. And forget it, they do. These observations are so obvious, you might wonder how anyone could deny them. Well, just think about your own educational experience. How many thousands of hours did you spend studying foreseeably useless material? Economists' standard response is simply to double back to the labor market. If college coursework were largely irrelevant in real life employers wouldn't pay college graduates a handsome premium. Strangely, though, there's a Nobel Prize-winning economic model that explains why even the most irrelevant education and even the silliest majors can be financially rewarding. It's called signaling. Basic idea. Academic success is a great way to convince employers that you've got the right stuff, to show off your brains, your work ethic, and your sheep-like conformity. Since people with these traits are productive workers, employers happily reward people who display them, even if the display has nothing to do with the job. Think about it like this. There's two distinct ways to raise the value of a diamond. The first is to give it to a gemsmith to cut the diamond to perfection. The second is to give it to an appraiser to attest to its flawlessness. The first story is like human capital. The second story is like signaling. Now, what difference does the mechanism make? For the individual student, not much. For society, however, it makes all the difference in the world. Insofar as the human capital model is right, government support for college enriches society as a whole by upgrading the skills of the workforce. Insofar as the signaling model is right, however, government support for college impoverishes society by sparking a wasteful credentialist arms race. So which model is right, human capital or signaling? The truth is obviously a mixture of both. In the case against education, however, I agree that signaling's share of the mix exceeds half and probably a lot more. So why should you agree with me? For starters, look at the curriculum. Most of what we teach in college is so otherworldly that you're only likely to use it on the job if you become a college professor yourself. No sane person in a non-academic job panics because they've forgotten everything the professors taught them about history, literature, or philosophy. Now, curriculum aside, you probably already agree with me. Did you bother to enroll in college or pay tuition? If all you wanted was the learning, this was a total waste because you can unofficially take classes for free at virtually any college in America. There's just one little problem. At the end of 4 years of guerrilla education, you won't have the crucial signal, the diploma. As a result, unofficial education barely exists. Suppose you could have a Princeton education without the diploma or a Princeton diploma without the education. Which would you choose? If you have to ponder, you already agree with me. Right? You already believe in the power of signaling. By contrast, if you were stranded on an island and you had to choose between knowledge of boat building and having a boat building degree, you wouldn't ponder. When you face the labor market, it's important to be impressive. When you face the ocean, all that matters is skill. Signaling dominates if you look at the way college students approach their studies. They routinely seek out easy A's, professors who dole out strong signals in exchange for little work. Of course, you don't learn very much from such professors, but who cares? After the final exam, you'll never need to know it again. Signaling likewise explains why academic cheating is not only cheating yourself. When you impersonate a good student, you hurt employers who hire you, and the honest students whose merits you indirectly call into question. Academic research reinforces common sense. While economists typically measure education's annual return, scholars who look find enormous diploma or sheepskin effects. Senior year pays far more than the first 3 years of college combined. This is very hard for human capital theory to explain. It makes perfect sense that college students are trying to signal their conformity by completing their degree. Macroeconomists, too, have found that while individual education has a big effect on individual income, national education only has a very small effect on national income. Now, to be fair, they rarely embrace the signaling explanation. Instead, they usually cry for better data so we can get the right result. All right. But signaling does clearly explain the results that they've got. If one laborer gets more relevant education, he outshines the competition. But if a whole labor force gets more relevant education, society's time and money go down the drain. Given the small effect of education on GDP, it's hardly surprising that few researchers find that education leads to higher GDP growth. If you're still trying to figure out if your machine moves at all, you probably do not have a perpetual motion machine. Now, the most striking academic evidence for signaling, though, comes from literature on credential inflation. The average worker today is years more educated than he used to be. How much of this is because jobs are more cognitively demanding? How much of this is because workers now need more education to get, though not do, a given job? In the case against education, I go over all the main studies. Punchline, the evolving labor market explains only about 20% of the rise in education. The remaining 80% is credential inflation. Right? You need college to convince today's employers to give you the same jobs that your parents or grandparents got right out of high school. This is puzzling for human capital theory. Why should employers pay for BAs when you need only a high school education to do the job? But signaling explains it very elegantly. The more degrees proliferate, the more you need to stand out. When I present these arguments, economists rarely deny that signaling seems like a persuasive story. Instead, they usually retreat to a priori objections. I'm sure Ed won't, but the other bad ones, the bad ones too. All right, and they're almost all bad. No. All right, so they almost all retreat to a priori objections. Appearances notwithstanding, signaling just can't be right. The most popular objection is just that college passes the market test. If it were mostly signaling, I've heard so many people tell me, someone would have figured out a cheaper signal long ago. But this is just crazy. Higher education receives hundreds of billions of dollars a year of taxpayer support. This is a classic sign that an industry fails the market test. Right? There are probably plenty of socially cheaper forms of labor market signaling, but as long as these massive subsidies continue, the substitutes will probably remain on the fringes. The easiest way to discover the good alternatives is to end government support for higher ed and see what comes next. Now, at this point, you could respond, all right, sure, education's mostly signaling, but the economic rewards are so great that it's still worth subsidizing. But signaling aside, there's still far less to education's economic rewards than meets the eye. Why? First, college graduates are not randomly selected. Most were already high performers back in high school. So if they hadn't gone to college, they probably would have been fairly successful anyway. When researchers statistically compare high school graduates to college graduates with equal pre-college ability, they almost always find the true effect on college on career success is a lot smaller than it looks. Second, standard comparisons focus on people who actually finish their degrees, but this is totally cheating. Right? College graduation for full-time students is about 50%. When you weigh college as an investment, correcting for this slashes the expected return once again. Now, a debate is admittedly not a good place to do arithmetic, so I'll just say read the book, and of course buy the book first. So in The Case Against Education, I snap all these pieces and many others together. Right? So and along the way, I seriously study potentially neglected benefits of college, so health, crime, you name it, because confirmation bias is bad. All right, now final result. From a social point of view, investments in college aren't just overrated, they're ruinous. Subsidizing this rat race is as economically foolish as handing out big cash prizes to the world's dirtiest polluters. When the economic case for tax-subsidized college crumbles, even many economists suddenly discover the finer things in life. What about the humanistic argument that college inspires love of ideas and culture, that it refines and elevates us? My quick response, a refinement and elevation would be great if it really happened, but the actual data say this is mostly wishful thinking. Only a minuscule fraction of college grads take a meaningful interest in ideas or culture after graduation. People who attend events like the Soho Forum for fun are really weird. and that is why I love you guys. All right, now you could agree with every word I said so far, but respond, instead of abolishing government support for higher education, government should use the power of purse to fix higher education. We can certainly imagine a world where colleges fill every student's mind with human capital and every student's heart with Shakespeare, so why not do that? Simple. Defunding dysfunctional systems is almost foolproof. Fixing dysfunctional systems, in contrast, is horribly hard. As a professor, I assure you the entire system bitterly resists even mild reforms. Most professors detest the very idea of objectively measuring the value of anything they do. They're artists. You can't deal with these people, and it's foolish to try. If someone says, sorry for wasting trillions of tax dollars, but we did a few good things, and we'll spend your money wisely from now on, the prudent reaction is to draw a line in the sand and just say, you're fired. But why should we be so extreme? So why not just cut half and see if that does the trick? So pragmatically speaking, abolition is just a lot more transparent. The scope of partial reforms is always confusing and debatable. When you separate college and state, you know it. Since this is the Soho Forum, though, let me end with my principled argument for full abolition, the presumption of liberty. I know there's a wide range of libertarian views. In fact, there is one libertarian view per libertarian. But we should all be able to agree that the burden of proof rests on the advocates of government intervention. If politicians are going to take our money without our consent, they should at least have solid proof the money is very well spent. Government support for college does not meet that bar, not even close. Thank you. So great pleasure to debate with Ed, because his arguments are different from those of any of the other critics. The most technical one is one where really you do need to read the book to decide for yourself, but this is on the question of, is the national payoff for education greater than, equal to, or smaller than the individual payoff? All I can say here is that when I started writing the book, I thought I was going to have to deal with the stuff that Ed told you. And then when I actually read the paper, I said, oh, wow, actually they already agree with me, so this is much easier than I was expecting. I think, so again, the stuff that Ed was saying, I don't think it's so much wrong as just the people who actually do the research would never do such a simple comparison. Instead, they would go and say, well, let's go and adjust for a few other things. And after they adjust for a few other things, that's where they have the trouble finding any noticeable effect of education. But again, so that's one where I just encourage you to read the book. That's the best place to resolve it. Hard to do it here. Let's see. Let's see. And then, let's see here. So why don't we just go over Ed's top 3 arguments for continuing to have some government involvement. So again, first of all, you've got this public goods nature of knowledge. Right? So again, this is one where I think we would agree that a great deal of the research that comes out of universities is just not very useful, right, or is actually of negative value. And then it comes down to the question of, is it worth pulling the plug on it if only 5 or 10% of the research is actually worthwhile? And this comes down to, do we have a system that is actually capable of finding that 5 or 10% so accurately that we can trust it? And this is where I just say no. Right? Now, furthermore, I would say that even for the research that comes out of universities that is clearly useful, there's still the question of where those researchers would have been if they weren't in universities. I say a lot of them would have ended up in the private sector and likely would have been doing things that were more useful in what they're doing. There is a standard view among academics that basic research is way more socially valuable than applied research. However, there's been a lot of research saying that's not really true, and basic research doesn't go anywhere. And it's the applied research that accomplishes almost everything. So Terence Keeley has a revisionist history of science, which I think is quite compelling on these grounds. And again, just the idea that if you want to come up with something useful, you should first try to figure out something not useful and then hope that coincidentally useful stuff comes out of it, just seems like a strange way to apply yourself if you're trying to find useful things. All right, now on the question of Pell Grants and social justice generally, right, this is one that weighed on me quite a bit. And this is where this argument I was giving you about credential inflation is so crucial. Right? Because it's very easy to go and take a look at an individual person and see they got some government money and this allowed them to go to college and turn their lives around. My best friend at Princeton came from a family so poor that he literally built a log cabin to live in when he was a kid. All right, and I have to say, like, without all this funding, well, probably Princeton was so rich they would have paid him. But anyway, but a lot of people like my friend would not have been in college. But here's the thing about that you need to do: don't focus on individuals. Focus on the system you are creating. Right? It's true one individual is better off when they get government money, but if everybody in a generation has access to this money, this means that people are going to get a lot more education, and this means that employers jack up the expectations for how much education you need to have to be worthy of an interview. And that's the fundamental problem. Right? We shouldn't be focusing on a few kids, very talented kids from poor families. Instead, why don't we think about the typical kid from poor families who no longer have the option of getting a good job right out of high school? Right? In the old days, you did have that option. Now, wasn't that just because the technology was different? No, because the technology hasn't changed nearly enough to explain the change. The main thing that's changed is that you now need a lot more education to get any given job. It's not that so much that we have switched to more technically demanding jobs. That's true, but that's only a small part of the story. The main thing that's occurred in our society is now there's so many people with college degrees that you need a college degree to be considered worthy of being trained for a good job, whereas in the past, a high school degree would have been fine. Right, so I see in terms of social justice, I think that while it's very intuitively plausible to think that government funding is supporting it, if we think about all of the opportunities that we have lost, it's a different story. And again, if you think about kids in towns where a lot of people are addicted to opioids, maybe if they could get good jobs right out of high school, things would look better for them. Right? Maybe if they looked around and saw, wow, if I just finish high school, then I can get a good job. Then that would be very motivating, possibly. All right. Furthermore, so if you really are concerned about this as being a deep problem, there is private philanthropy. Ed, coming from Harvard, I know he knows about private philanthropy. There have been multiple economists who have pointed out that one of the best things to do if you're from a poor family, is apply to very top schools. Because in fact, places like Harvard will probably let you in for less money than George Mason would. Seriously. All right, so Caroline Hawksby has done a lot of this, and if you just get some practical advice here, right, if you're from a poor family, apply to the very best places because the money they have is beyond all your imagination. So, all right, so don't think I can't go to Harvard because I'm poor. No, that's where you should go. It's the perfect place to go if you're poor. All right, now last one on Jefferson and citizenship. This is where there is the ideal, which I strongly agree with. My first book, The Myth of the Rational Voter, is all about lamenting how little Americans know about politics and economics. But here's the thing. People who go to college today still know next to nothing about this stuff. I would love if you would make me curriculum czar and I could whip them into shape and say, you don't graduate unless you can do supply and demand. Sorry. All right, but that is not on the agenda, not even close. In fact, probably more on the agenda if there was any centralized system was you don't graduate if you do understand supply and demand. All right. So the other side, though, is that people aren't learning much good stuff either. Right? So the actual level of knowledge that college graduates have of civics or history is, again, so abysmally low, it's almost impossible for people at places like the Soho Forum even to imagine it. But again, buy the book, read it, and see the depressing truths about how little knowledge people have. Now again, if right now we only gave people like 6 weeks on civics, then I think it'd be totally reasonable to try Ed's approach and let's just try harder. But if you give people 3 or 4 years of this stuff and they still don't know anything, this is where I say, look, apparently the system is just not very worthwhile. And again, remember, of course, who is going to be teaching this stuff? It's probably going to be the professors that neither Ed nor I are particularly fans of. Last thing, I do think it is a bit odd, given that Ed is concerned about keeping government away from anything that affects the soul, to think that government would be good at shaping citizens. What kind of citizens do you think government wants to shape, Ed? All right, but anyway, thank you very much. And as I said, privileged to debate with Ed.
Okay. Well, Brian, also, question of clarification. I think that the sheepskin effect was mentioned a couple times by Ed and by you. Could you take a little bit more time than you did to explain what you mean by the sheepskin effect?
Yeah, so imagine this thought experiment. You're on your way to your last final exam in college and you get in a bike accident, right? And so you miss your final exam. You have a really hard-ass teacher who says, sorry, tough luck, you can't retake the exam. What should you do? So if you think that all that's going on in college is that you're getting paid for skills you acquire, then you should just forget about it. It's no big deal. Just get out of the hospital, get well, and go get your job. On the other hand, if you think that signaling is important, you should be concerned and say, maybe I better go and retake that last class so that I don't spend my whole career with this bad mark on my record. All right, so anyway, so the sheepskin effect is this attempt to measure how much extra payoff do you get for actually crossing the graduation finish line versus merely doing the individual years. All right, so there is at least a moderate-sized literature on this. And in the book, I go and try to track down every single paper on this and just take an average. And so the average that I get is that senior year is worth 6.7 times as much as an average year. So basically, if you look at the average value of years 1, 2, or 3, senior year seems to be worth 6.7 times that in percentage terms, so even more extreme. Right? And again, so now it is possible this is just because it's the better students that do wind up finishing, but at least the papers where they put in measures of ability, normally what they find is when you put in measures of ability, it does reduce the value of graduation, but it also reduces estimates of the value of the individual years, leaving the ratio very similar to what I told you. Yeah, so they do meet the standard. Education is not in the adjustment. Here is here is the main thing that I would say. The people who do research in this area generally want to find a very large effect of education on national growth, and they struggle to do it, and they don't do it. And to me, this is one of the things that makes a research literature credible is if the researchers want answer A and get not A, and they work on it for decades, and they still can't get the right answer. All right, now, so Lant Pritchett is probably a different story. Right, he's more of a contrarian. Yes, but the main paper that I cite in the book is there's actually one that actually goes and redoes the standard results with all 8 known data sets. Those authors' own data set comes up with a higher number, and they say, this is what makes it good. But as far as I can tell, they're the only ones who believe their data set is particularly good. So there are people who really want the answer to come out high, and they go through 8 data sets, and really they find like a couple come up with results that are maybe where the national payoff is maybe half for an individuals, and all the other ones are less. So, I mean, to me, that's even when you don't go and actually crack open the box and look at everything they did, which is really hard, of course, that could take decades. But still, if people who want to find a result don't get it, that seems very trustworthy to me. Yeah, so, like I said, right now we pour about $300 billion worth of government money at all levels on the status quo. So a lot of what I would say is let's stop pouring the money and then see what replaces it. Right? There are so many other options. Again, I think a big part of it is just that people are going to spend fewer years in school. Right? And that won't look bad anymore when a lot of other people do it. So it is true that in earlier decades, people actually just spent fewer years in school, and they were able to get a job right out of high school, and then they're signaling to rise through the system. But again, that's a much more socially functional kind of signaling where you show that you actually are able to do the job, and you signal through job performance. So I think that's a big part of it. Again, so since this debate was only in college, I didn't talk about my other stuff in high school. So, I mean, I'm a high school abolitionist too, or at least government funding for it. In fact, yes, so it's not integral to the argument at all. But in the book, I do several times say I actually favor full separation of school and state, which I think will make Gene happy, although make Ed even less happy. But anyway, so in terms of more moderate reforms, I think just getting kids that do not like academics to start looking at vocational education when they're in middle school or early in high school would be another big improvement. Which again, it also provides a signal, but at the same time, it's providing more genuine skill creation. So again, really what you want to do from a social point of view is to try to get a twofer, to have people signaling and acquiring useful skills at the same time. Right, rather than the system that we got where the two are fairly separate.
Brian, who's going to pay for that vocational training?
Yeah, well, again, so this is, like I said, this is one of my half-made measures. So yeah, if we're just keeping the existing system of public education, then you're just taking the existing budget and putting it into vocational education. So that's no big puzzle.
But is there, given your abolition side, is there a dream that you think that somehow that is a private or philanthropic way that millions of American kids are going to get vocational training that without any public support?
Yes. So again, Soho Forum, you may have heard, at least the audience here may have heard about education in Britain and the U.S. in the 19th century and the very high levels of literacy that were achieved before there was significant government money. So again, precisely because people get so upset about the idea of poor kids not having education, I think that there would be plenty of philanthropic money. Of course, wouldn't be money for the very wasteful education system we have right now. Again, if you just realize that right now we're spending like $12,000 per kid, and yet 30 years ago we were spending a tiny fraction of that, even adjusting for inflation. I don't see why for very poor kids, philanthropy couldn't pay for a much more stripped down version of education, which again is probably a better one anyway, because back in the old days, kids could play when they weren't doing their studies. Unlike now, where you're being bossed around for 8 or 9 hours a day.
Comment, Brian?
Sure. So, Ed mentioned that the social benefits of education seem to be bigger at the regional level, and this is where I say the reverse causation is especially easy because the highly educated people tend to go to the booming areas of the economy. Right, so New York and Seattle and the Bay Area suck up highly educated people from other parts of the country. And here's the thing: if my story is right, that would still happen. Because if my story is right, then the high ability people will tend to go and have a lot of education, which they need in order to show off, and then they will go and take their high ability and take it to these areas of the country that are booming. So I would just say that really, both stories would predict basically the same thing. Yeah, so in terms of the facts, totally agree with you. So in my book, I put a lot of effort into tracking down evidence on what American adults know. Because the standard way that we measure educational outcomes is to give someone a final exam or an exit test. And again, the problem with this, as any psychologist will tell you, is people forget stuff. Right, a lot of stuff. In fact, people tend to forget almost everything they don't use after a few years. So anyway, these tests of what American adults know are, to me, are what the real measure of education's accomplishments are. And yeah, I think so. There have been two big national tests of American adults' literacy and numeracy, and both of them wind up saying that maybe about a third of American adults are barely literate and numerate, which seems like a terrible result for a country where we're putting in so much money per year, and of course spending so many years. In terms of other countries, so the U.S. is close to the highest spending per student in the world, right? And I think we're now about average in terms of years that we spend in school for rich countries. So in terms of what other countries are doing better, probably part of it is just their students start out better, honestly. Right? So South Korean students probably start out better than American students. So the day they arrive in school, they're probably already doing better in literacy and numeracy. In terms of teaching quality, it seems plausible to me they got better teaching quality, although, again, remember Finland, which also does great. They don't even start school till 7, and they don't seem to be very into testing at all, which is pretty amazing. So, now the question is, do I think that I could go and improve literacy numeracy if you put me in charge? Then yeah. All right, which, again, mostly just by putting a lot more time on task. So when I go and look at the curriculum for K through 12 schools in my area, and to see that you're spending over half of your school day on non-academic material, and then realize there's plenty of kids who still can barely read and write. It's like, stop doing that. No art and music until you can read and write. Obviously, this is crazy to go and have them going and singing chorus when they can't add. But here's the thing: I have no optimism that these even very basic proposals will be adopted. Why? Because I've been to parent-teacher night, and I've seen how they think. If I were to say this, they would just look at me like something they scraped off the bottom of their shoe. This is not. They say, "I think we could do both." Well, you haven't, right? And so I learned to shut up a long time ago. But yeah.
That maybe there are areas in which we have to do less public. There may be areas in which we need to do more competitive, voucher-provided services of different forms. But I can't look at America and think the right answer is let's just shut down public funding for education and then everything will be hunky-dory. That just feels completely not right to me, and I don't think that I can see an example in the world where that looks right to me. So by all means, let's admit our failings, and Brian's been great on this. Let's question every nonsense assumption that we handle around, and Brian's been great on this. But I don't think the right answer is to give up on a public commitment to trying to actually make sure our children actually learn something.
So again, I don't think things will be hunky-dory if you listen to me. I think we'll just stop wasting a ton of money. All right. It's very different. So, I'm not someone...
Yeah, they'll just build more. They'll just build more monorails in stupid places, Brian. That's
a strange political economy model. Maybe there'll be a few more stupid monorails, but I think also there'll be some deficit reduction. There'll be some tax reduction. There'll be some more roads. So again, I will say that when I look at roads, even if they're not causing economic growth, at least you can drive. So that's nice. Yeah, when I see people when you build a new road and I look at the drivers, they seem happy. Whereas when I go and look at a classroom, the students seem sad. So.
Next question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the easy answer for me is to say MBAs, unlike most of this other stuff, are super useful. However, I've talked to way too many MBAs who tell me that's completely wrong. So then I've got to come up with another story. And whatever you think about this is a small percentage of a small percentage. So I wouldn't put too much weight on it. But again, the best story that I've got is that even after you've been working in a firm in a subordinate role, there's still a lot of uncertainty about whether you got the right stuff to be management, whether you are management material. And I think that's a lot of what's going on, is that they offer these MBA programs to see who has the real ambition, who's really determined to go and do a second job at night in order to rise in this company, and who can be offered this deal and just say, I don't feel like it. So I think that there is this useful secondary signaling that's going on. But again, maybe the MBA really is teaching useful stuff. It's just that, which again, I'm very open to, except that everyone I know with firsthand experience says that's wrong. A quick comment on that. So Ed just repeated what I think is Gary Becker's greatest mistake, which is that private employers do not have an incentive to train their workers in general skills because the worker can just take the skills and go someplace else. That's true unless employers can have you work for a lower wage when you're being trained, which they totally can. All right. The only exception really is for workers that would need to earn less than minimum wage. There, for college students, we do have this great loophole where you're allowed to work for free. You can't work for $1 less than minimum wage, but you can work for free if you're getting training for a college-type job. There's a lot of people who are angry about this and want to apply the minimum wage to the interns as well. I say really we should expand it so that everyone can work for free. And why is it so great to be able to work for free? Because you get something useful. You get actual practical job training. And again, to me, the moral outrage at employers who go and don't pay you anything when you're working for them is bizarre, given that colleges could charge $70,000 a year to go and give you a lot less, and people don't complain about that.
Yeah. I think on the policy side, actually, we largely agree. I think in terms of just the current status quo, the minimum wage is a binding commitment for McDonald's employees who are going to be given some extra training. So in fact, there is this lower bound that makes it hard for them to pay for it by getting lower wages.
Well, the BLS could just reinterpret its internship or its unpaid internships rules, which are already a giant loophole that you can drive a truck through. So why not let them drive 2 trucks through it?
Next question. I'm sorry to say, Brian, that you're going to have to answer that question in your summary statement because we've run out of time. To the questions, I know Brian's going to be around signing books and answering questions. Ed, unfortunately, is going to have to go. But we will hear from Ed in terms of his summary. Ed is the negative, so he goes last. Brian, you go first with your summary, and then perhaps you can answer the question about Aleppo.
All right, so Ed began by saying that we got the intellectual range from A to B here. I think we more have like the intellectual range from like A to D or maybe even like A to G. The disagreements between Ed and I is actually, I would say, seem to be quite a bit bigger. In a way, actually, if I believe what Ed seems to believe, I would be probably much more pro-education than he is, because if it really were true that a year of education were increasing in national income by 50%, that's a really impressive gain. That's far outside the realm of almost anything else that's known. So my guess is that Ed doesn't quite take the estimates as literally as he was saying. But so if you really did think that, then it would seem that he would be quite a bit more different than for me than I am. Again, just going back to the empirical work, the main thing I can say about that is it's very hard for a layman to go and evaluate the actual quality of the work independently. It's even hard for a researcher. Very often, if you were to go and email the researchers and say, please give me all your data and all your work, they'll just say, I did it 20 years ago. Sorry, the dog ate it. That's it. The main thing that I can say here in terms of convincingly establishing the reliability of the results I'm telling you is that the researchers didn't want to find these small results, and what do people do when they get results they don't want? They try it a different way, and they look around. Is there something wrong with the data? They go scrutinizing. Is there some other way that we could somehow find it? And in the end, saying, I guess I just had to publish this and hope someone else finds a mistake. So I would say that out of people who have actually gone through this, the people that I could find, there was a very strong consensus that the social benefits of education are a lot less than the private, contrary to what Ed's telling you. And then the main disagreement was about the interpretation. Again, I would say the most popular interpretation is our data sucks and we are looking for better data. Right? And furthermore, I actually found that there are a couple of people in print said, we will know when we got the good data based upon whether it gives us a high number. Right? So I think this does give you an idea about the level of motivated reasoning, and the fact that they're not getting it, I think, does establish that the result is pretty solid. On bad ideas being harmless options, well, there's a whole lot of academic ideas that have worked out very negatively, so I'm not going to blame Ed for Marxism, but it's just worthwhile saying there's a whole lot of universities that did promote this stuff, and it did work out very poorly. I'm really not going to blame Ed for Nazism, but Hitler did really well with not Nazi professors, of course, but with the German university professors, did really well for them. So again, now does this mean that it always works out this way? No, but I think the idea that there's just a lot of poisonous ideas that come out of academia is reasonable. I think again a lot of a lot of hostility to markets has come out of academia, which I think both Ed and I and most of the audience here will agree is a bad thing. And also very striking that many of the negative ideas can die and then they come back as zombie ideas. So rent control is a new idea again. You might have thought, didn't the 70s and 80s kill it? Yes, and now it's alive again. And a good part of this is a good part of the responsibility does come from not economists at least, but from people at other social science departments. Let's give this a second look. I found a town somewhere where it didn't seem to destroy everything, so let's consider that. So again, to repeat, I don't claim that things would be hunky-dory if people listen to me, and I don't think that my proposal would revive West Virginia. What I'll say is if the whole country did it, West Virginia wouldn't get worse, and we would save a ton of money. Right? And again, that money could be spent on a wide variety of things. Could be spent on libertarian things like tax cuts and deficit reduction, or of course could be spent on all of the other things that people might want to consider. Could be spent on increasing transfer payments, or it could be spent on, how about this? How about there is a bonus if you are a young male from a poor family who never goes to jail before the age of 30. You could try something like that. There could be a bonus if you are a young female from a poor family and you don't have a child until you're 25. right? There are a lot of different ways that you could spend this money in a way that would be a lot more fruitful than ones we do, if that's what you want to do. Now, I'm enough of a libertarian to say that's not what I think we should be spending the money on. I think we should be focusing on tax cuts and deficit reduction. But again, if you are concerned about the things that Ed's concerned with, there's still no reason not to go full abolition for education for higher education spending, and think about a much more constructive way of spending the money. So I will stop there. Thanks a lot.
Okay, we are now going to open the final vote on the resolution. All government support of higher education should be abolished. Jane, how are we doing on the voting? It looks like we're closing the voting, so please bring the results to us, to me. No, that's all right. Okay, so the yes votes were 50.5%. See, Brian, you started with 50.5%, and you went to 63%, so you picked up 12.6 percentage points. Ed was at 25%, and he stayed at 25%. So looks like you win the Tootsie Roll. Thank you.